Hi, everybody. Welcome to While I Wait, an Operation Plan Your Wedding podcast. So today I have Penny Morgan, or should I say your full name?
Penny's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Penny Morgan. And Penny is the director of Hephzibah House. I had the pleasure of first meeting you in the Symphony NY Chorus in New York City, where we are recording today. And we are also in Hephzibah House. Thanks to Penny, Andy, and other donors who made it possible for myself and other creatives in ministry to be able to record episodes like this for you. So welcome, Penny.
Thanks. This is my first podcast.
I'm glad. So welcome to the Faith Table, as I like to call it.
Well, my name is Penny Morgan. I'm originally from Indianapolis and moved to New York when I was about 18 to go to King's College. And I've stayed in New York ever since. I love the city. Felt really called to the city in high school, and cool how God really had a plan in that. I didn't know how that would turn out, but here I am. I met my husband here in the city and got married in 2012, and now we have 3 kids who are 7, 6, and 4. We live at, and I run Hephzibah House, which is a Christian guest house, so it's for people in ministry to have a place to rest and retreat in New York at an affordable rate. And then we also have the space for people, ministries to use for things like this in our studio, but also there's event space in the house too. So it's really fun to have like a little bit of a connection with so many parts of God's family around the world through this ministry. And yeah, now been married about almost 11 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So it's kind of funny that you asked about my single years. Have a long time ago, but also I'm still the same person, as I was then. So those are the basics.
Well, I do remember you sharing with myself and Tommy. Tommy also came on the podcast, so they should know by now how she is. That you did come to New York when you were 18, but I forgot that you actually stayed at 18.
Mm-hmm.
In my head, I just thought maybe visited and then went back and then decided to come back later. And then, so I'm curious to know, you came here at 18, you sensed on your heart God was calling you here. Out of curiosity, how could you be sure of that calling at that age? Arguably, no one is ever too young to know God. Yet I think from what we hear in culture and even like Christian spaces, we sometimes unfortunately apply, do what that verse is saying, like, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but like even in a Christian space, we do that.
I actually was 15 the time I really sensed that call. So that was in high school. My pastor, he had interned at a church here in Queens when he was in seminary. And so he wanted to take all us like Indiana youth group kids to New York and broaden our horizons a little bit and get a bigger, like kind of give us exposure to like the larger Christian world outside of the Midwest. And it definitely worked. So we were at New Life Fellowship out in Queens, which is a really special church, still going today. Doing really well, which is great. And we just joined in on a conference they were doing. And I think something about being around Christians who were living in a much more post-Christian environment really just grabbed me. And I don't know what, I know I was pretty immature then, 15, right? Like, but I just my heart just got kind of stuck on it. Like, I got to be a part of that. And I didn't have an idea like, oh, I'm going to go into this industry or go become a pastor's wife or go into ministry. Like, I didn't know what that would look like. I could never have imagined Hephzibah House back then. But I guess, the desire was really strong. And I think I felt like I should hold it loosely, and leave it up to God, which I don't know if anyone told me to do that or if it was just something that I sensed in my own heart. But I held it loosely. And then a friend of mine back home had told me about King's College, which is in New York, and then ended up with a big scholarship. So I was the cheapest college option I had. So it just became very obvious that it was supposed to happen. And I don't know if that's sort of a rare thing or if God puts desires in your heart so he can spoil you and show you how much he loves you, and he makes your dreams come true,
Hey.
And I also remember when I was about 20, I think it was like it was almost at the end of my senior year. It was like the last semester. And it was the winter, and I was walking to church, and I was walking through like Madison Square Park, and it was snowing. It was so pretty. It was nighttime, so evening service, like on my way there, and it was just like heart-meltingly beautiful, the city. And I just felt I was really anxious about after graduation, like what was I going to do? A lot of my friends had this whole plan, and like how they're going to go to law school or go into journalism, or they had all these things they were going to do, and I didn't know. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be like a really good Christian New Yorker. That's all I knew. But I was thinking about that and really sensed like God's peace. Like, I'm going to keep you here. It's going to be okay. Like, very clear feeling,
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen often in my life, but I remember it. And then at church that Sunday, like I got to church, sat in my pew, we did worship time, and then the sermon was about staying in the city. It was about how the city needs people to put their roots down. And I think there were a lot of transplants, in the congregation. And so he was really speaking to that idea, like, don't just come to the city to consume, pad your resume and leave. And I just like wanted to jump up and volunteer, but it felt so like confirmation. Like I didn't know how it was going to work out, but, of course I was able to find a job after college and I don't know, my job seemed kind of random, in a bunch of different areas, but it did work out, and here I am, still here, 17 years later. No, not slowing down. I love it. I would die here. I'd be happy to die here.
That's amazing. I think, yeah, because hearing you share, I'm like, I do really think there's a lot of wisdom in that, knowing that you had at 15, like, I'll hold this desire loosely.
Yeah.
I'm on the opposite end of like, oh my gosh, I have the desire. Oh my gosh, what do I need to do to make this happen? Because, I guess I can't just sit and let something just be.
Well, I definitely pursued it. I mean, entered that scholarship competition, dragged my parents out here to visit this little tiny college that, barely is barely going, But I looked at other schools. I wasn't just looking at the one.
But I think
I knew what I wanted.
Yeah, like your heart, at least what I sense is that the heart posture you had is, I'm going to do my best, and like, faith without works is dead. So I'm going to apply my faith with works. But also I trust that if it's God's will, it will happen some way, somehow.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah.
But I'll put
how I was about
that's
it.
my net.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I'm like, that's my net. And I'm like,
and the fact that my parents were so supportive of me coming here. And I remember, especially my dad during that college visit, just feeling, this really feels like the perfect thing for you. And, I mean, that's, if you have parents who are believers, like that is a really, really, I mean, God has said like they're an authority over you. Like he has given them the wisdom they need to guide you. So listen to your parents. If they're wise people, if they follow Christ, like even if they don't do it perfectly, even if you have a rough relationship with them, like I think there's so many times where we're just like, oh, my parent's not perfect, so I don't have to listen to what they're saying, or what they say isn't that valuable, or I should take it with a grain of salt. Like, okay, maybe, but take it seriously, like more than you would take a friend's advice. It's weightier because God's grace is like on it,
And that's coming from a parent too. So.
Oh, yeah. Said my own kids.
So I'm like, I think she has extra perspective on that. Yeah, I think I personally I try my best to be as vulnerable as I can with this. And I'm like, I struggle some days. But then I'm like, today I told my therapist, well, I'm just going to sit and assess like things are the way they are. And God's goodness is even here and that, like even in my present circumstances. But like there's things I'm like, oh, I wish I just had their blessing. I feel like everything would just happen if I did,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I don't know. For whatever reason, they don't think that's a thing, or
like they're not in agreement with you on something.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, well, I do know that God supersedes all. But if it's also an opportunity for me to just like submit myself to that authority, like.
Well, just nobody knows you better. No human knows you better than your parents.
Right.
And no human loves you more than your parents, So that's why they're wise. Because kind of like God, there's no one who loves you more and there's no one who knows you more. So like he's the one who you should look to. So I think in a human sense, parents like the closest thing.
Yeah. And it makes sense.
So,
it makes total sense. So you stayed in New York,
mm-hmm.
which is beautiful. Because I forget that is true. Like, yeah, people come to the city, get what they want, and then like leave. Not to say like, hey, if you have to leave the city, leave.
Of
But
course.
granted, like, yeah, who will stay? And be a part of the local community long term. So in between you moving from Indianapolis to New York, I don't know if you met Andy during college or when, but like, how did you guys meet and how did that story?
Yeah. Well, he's 5 years older than me.
Okay.
So he went to Wheaton College out in Illinois.
Okay.
And he was back. I mean, by the time I was at college, he graduated in 2005. I started at King's in 2006. So we were both living in the city. We just never really crossed paths until my senior year. And I was actually friends with his parents first. So they were a ministry couple in the city, and someone at King's knew I wanted to stay in New York, and then I had a heart for like the church in New York, and they're like, you should meet Ed and Judy. They would be really great for you to know, like as a networking contact. So this friend from the staff at college like goes to their church or something. So she connected me with them, and Ed would like have a little networking meeting with me and help me figure out what I was interested in. Kind of like took me under his wing a little bit. And they'd have me over for dinner sometimes, and because we live nearby each other. And I don't know if there was any like setup situation in the works. It wasn't even on my. They were talking about having grandchildren and like it was.
It didn't occur to you?
No, it did not occur to me. Their son, their other two sons are a lot older than Andy, and had like, had kids already. And I was like, oh yeah, like wasn't even on my radar that their youngest son was still single. I figured he was like 40 or something, which is what he is now. But I was over there having dinner with them once, and Andy was there. And so he was working on he's in the architecture world, and one of his projects was in my hometown in near Indianapolis. And so that's kind of what we first talked about. And I actually had a different boyfriend at the time. So I thought he was a really nice guy, but I was at that time like very into this other guy. So we had the dinner. The boyfriend never came up in conversation somehow. I don't know. Andy says I think Andy thinks that was some sort of like sort of Freudian slip. Like deep down in my heart, I didn't really want him to know I had a boyfriend. I don't know about that. But he asked me out right away, and I felt like, oh, I don't want him to feel embarrassed. I didn't tell him about the boyfriend, so I let him down easy. But like kept him in the back of my mind, like maybe for a friend or something, because I could tell he was like quality, And
kind of you.
Yeah, I almost like tried to set him up with a roommate, and then I saw him with a girl at like this event one time. So I was like, oh, okay, he found somebody, So a bunch of months go by, and eventually the other relationship didn't work out, which I could talk about that too at some point. But and our mutual friend reached out to him to let him know, like, hey, Penny's single again, So he reached out again, and we went out just a couple weeks after I'd broken up with the other guy. So yeah.
And everything else is...
Yeah, so 15 months later, we got engaged, and then we got married 7 months after that.
Nice.
So
I am curious to know what prompted your mutual friend, to be like, hey, Penny's single.
Yeah, well, I think he had told her. Like, I asked her out, and she has this other boyfriend. And she was like, oh, bummer,
But she's single?
Yeah. So,
oh, good.
That's like a heads up. Yeah, there's like a friend of ours.
If you can.
Yeah, she's like in her 40s, like single lady that we knew, and it was kind of just, I don't know, just kind of had like she knew both of us. She's the only person who knew both of us. She's the one who introduced me to the parents, and same lady.
Yeah.
So she was like really good friends with the whole Morgan family. But yeah, so then we started dating, and I never had to do the meet the parents thing because I already knew them. So, and Andy was like a local celebrity when I brought him back home.
Oh, wow.
Because he was working on that building, and it was like, it was a concert hall that was going up. So it was like on the news a lot. So all my relatives would just sort of like drop by when he, unannounced to meet this guy that I brought back. It was very funny.
It sounds like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah,
And I love
Small town girl meets.
Granted, I'm like, they're so predictable, but I'm like, this is actually really cute.
Yeah. I started getting all the clippings, like everything in the newspaper about the concert hall in the mail, But
that's cool.
Pictures of the construction site and stuff. Is Andy in that picture? Like, no, people are like the size of ants. I don't know. So funny.
Wow, that's beautiful. I know you said you're willing to talk about the other relationship, so
Sure.
I'm curious to know if perhaps there are like things you learned from that relationship that you're like, at the end, here are my takeaways.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely came out of I don't know how many of your listeners would relate to this like purity culture world. Okay, because
Maybe we should. I haven't actually addressed it, but it'll be
okay, yeah. So I think it would have started with this book called "I Kissed Dating Goodbye" by Josh Harris, who as himself,
guys, but I know of it, and I did enough research to know the concepts of it.
Yeah, I mean, there are some good things in it, like don't just date for fun, date purposefully, and I mean, he calls it courtship, not dating, because he wants to kind of create a new category. Yeah, so that I agree with. Like, get your parents involved, and right away. Like, don't just be off on your own, and no community around your relationship. That's a really good principle.
Yep.
But there were some principles in it that I think I kind of absolutized. I'm a little bit of a legalist if left to myself, so I was always looking for like rules that would like be sure thing kind of thing when I was younger. And so there were some things in it like, when you date and it doesn't work out, it's like you've given a piece of your heart away, and like those kinds of like you've damaged yourself, you've given away something that you can't get back
just from dating
or kissing or so just like very extreme in that sense.
Yeah.
So when I got to college, that was the perspective I had, which is like, if I do everything right, I'll marry the first guy I date because that's God's best. It was kind of
I had that mentality.
Yes, that was the mentality I had, and so there was a guy I dated for 3 months or something and didn't work out, and nothing crazy happened. It just we weren't he wasn't that into me, and that's fine, like on the surface.
Yeah.
But it really triggered a whole kind of comeuppance with God for me. He has no idea, We all went on our merry way. We continued, being on a worship team together. We're friends today. But at that time, like, I had to reckon with, like, oh, am I damaged? Did I give my heart away? Does God even, like, see me? Is this all false? This stuff, I thought it was, like, a sure thing to, like, protect me from heartbreak and all suffering is bad. And, and had to really, like, deal with that. It took about a semester I remember one of my roommates started to tell me, who had been through a breakup at that time, this was kind of the turning point. She said, oh yeah, I ran into the guy at the gym and I actually forgot that I had dated him for a little while. Like it's just been so long. And that, just hearing that story, like, released me.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, you actually can heal and you aren't damaged. And, I didn't sin with that relationship. And sin damages you, right? But I had not done anything. I mean, nothing major anyway. So I'm sure in my heart there's things, obviously there always are, but like there was no like anything that I was like was do differently, I guess. But just the fact that I had a failed dating relationship, I had sort of painted it as like some sort of like stain on me or something. When she told that story, it really released me, I think, and I started to heal after that. And she doesn't actually know that either. So long ago. So then the guy that I was dating when I was with Andy, really nice guy, good, godly guy, just not my godly guy, I think, is at the end of the day. And, he's married now, has kids, it's all good. It was a hard breakup, though. I mean, he really wanted to stay together, and I
just hadn't met Andy yet.
Oh, I know. And, it was one of those things where I think that relationship, the takeaway was he was an artist, like freelance in music. And we were going to a church that had a lot of artists in it and people who were married who were artists. And so we had these examples around us of couples who were doing the freelance kind of live paycheck to paycheck world, a little less stable.
Y'all, because if you're in that community, you need to know how to.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, they are doing it.
Yeah.
I should be able to do it. But it made me so anxious. It was just. And I think realizing like, oh, I'm not cut out for that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not because it's a bad life or a bad choice for him, but it's not what the life I really ever wanted, something a little more stable and like realizing that's okay and not something, it's because I'm a human being and I can't do everything that everyone else can do. And I think he found somebody who's also an artist in the end. So good. Yeah. And I think, he was, had been a really good friend and then it had turned into a relationship. And I grieve that friendship being over, I wish in a way that we had never dated because I would have liked to still have that friendship. But, sometimes it's healthier just to, he moved to another city. So there's no reason we still, have mutual friends that I'll ask how he's doing. But yeah, that was a hard breakup because there wasn't like there was something really wrong to make it really obvious to break up. But that was, it would have been okay to marry him, right? It would not have been a sin. It wouldn't have been, But I think realizing that deep down I didn't really want to do the freelance artist wife thing.
Yes.
So
I think that's such healthy perspective to like know that about yourself going into the dating really, because then you don't, at least arguably, I'd hope someone else who's in the same shoes wouldn't compromise that need for like, hey, I really desire stability.
Yeah. Well, the theme of both of those relationships is I wanted to be this superwoman who's perfect. Like the first person I date is like I date perfectly and I never break up. I get married to the first person I date. Or the second one where doesn't matter what life is ahead of me, I can handle it. Like that's pride, in the end was what I faced.
So do you think it would have been, I mean, granted, we're glad you ended up with Andy.
Yeah.
Your life is the way it is because you both are on a certain trajectory together. But for example, if I came up to you and was like, hey, I don't want to be with this guy because he lives paycheck to paycheck, and Penny, I want to see stable income. I want my life to be predictable. Is that pride? I mean, I could see how it is.
I think the part that was pride was I thought that I could handle any life, what the artist's life was, that
like it was something you could take.
That I could take on. I shouldn't have a limit to what I could handle. And to admit that I had a limit, which was that I needed more stability, was to admit some like humanity in myself, like that I'm not Superwoman.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
I don't think it's wrong to
for you guys.
Yeah,
Understand.
I think it'd be prideful to be like, well, I want a big mansion and
Yeah.
like that's
Beyond the basics.
yeah. There's like a
Starters.
yeah. You have to be. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You can't plan for it, but you don't have to willingly sign on to something that deep down in your heart you're like, oh, this is going to be really hard, and I don't know if I really have it in me to,
And I think that healthy communication is key because you were able to do that, whereas somebody else might have shied away from saying something.
It took me a long time to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm working on that now, and it's tough. And I'm like, I'm excited to see who I become the bolder I get to say, like, how I'm really feeling in my head versus, like, I just hope everything works out. Because I'm, like, often in my head, and I'm, like, not saying it, and I'm like, you have to say it. Nobody can read your mind. Nobody can read your mind.
Yeah.
There's something you said, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to go on a tangent with you there, but if it comes back to me.
The one thing I would share, too, with the relationship right before Andy is that I could tell it really prepped me for Andy. Like,
ooh, tell us.
So, I mean, this, the guy before Andy, we were really close friends, kind of like very similar personalities, chatty, outgoing, a little more extroverted. We were like two peas in a pod kind of relationship. I think there's those kinds. So there's the opposites attract relationships, which is what Andy and I are. And we were in this church community that really celebrated artists and people who were very outgoing and loud and big personalities, right? And so Andy's more quiet. Andy's introverted. He's like a rock, though. I mean, he's so stable, like on an emotional level, but I mean, not just, finances, obviously. It's much more than that. But he's a rock in the best way. And I think when I realized, like, oh, that's kind of what I need, it made me attracted to him in a different way. And I think as well, like, something to do while you're waiting, is figure out what story you're part of. I mean, I felt so strongly about being in New York.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing with the artist guy was like, I felt like there's a pretty good chance he's not going to make it and we'd need to live in the Midwest or something, And I feel really called to New York. I feel really called to the church here. And Like, I knew that about myself. And so I felt like I was part of a story that was bigger than me. And so when I got to know Andy, I realized, oh, he's bought in on that same idea. And that's really where we connected first. It was like we both feel called to be in New York and like part of the church here and build it up. We're kind of part of the same story together.
Yeah.
So we could have really different personalities, but have the same mission.
Yeah.
You can always develop your mission, your personal mission or things that you really care about long before you like meet anybody.
Yes.
So
before I expand on that idea, where is home? Where does Andy call home?
He's from Connecticut, so it's New York suburbs.
So he's also coming into the city.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the concept of mission. We had a OPYW call in advance of our event this Saturday, and one of the things that came up in our like prayer conversation was that it's really great if you can, as a believer, and you're, I guess, conscious of the fact that we all have an identity in Christ. We're all called to do the Great Commission, but how that looks for everyone is uniquely different. But if you know that uniqueness, it can be helpful when you're like dating towards the purpose or the goal of marriage, because you can then say, okay, these are the things that God has placed on my heart about who I am, how he wants me to function in the world. I see what you're presenting. Could this work? And discerning with like, hey, could this work? Maybe it can, maybe it can't, or maybe you guys are bonding over something else and you decide we're going to make it work. But I think it can be helpful because what I've personally been observing when I listen, and this is not necessarily amongst Christians, but some Christians go through it as well. But when I hear people's divorce stories, it sounds like, at least what I'm hearing is, two people felt like they were on the same page. They knew who they were for that season. But when they finally felt like they came to the full knowledge of like, oh, this is where I'm going long term, it was like, oh, this won't work. And so some people use the phrase, they outgrew each other. I personally don't believe, how I'll say it is, for me, let's say I get married and, my husband and I feel like all of a sudden we've outgrown each other. Like, we're going to figure out how to grow together. I don't know how that's going to look. I'm going to figure it out together. But for people who don't have hope in Christ and, Christ is not the foundation of their relationship, I can understand why they'd just be like, yeah, this is not going to work. So I'm going to go with, whoever feels like is compatible for that season. So I think, you bringing up mission is really key, because I think it's to our advantage to have that insight and then to actually apply it even in our love lives. Like, how are we dating? Who are we considering? Because we could honestly marry any believer. Like, you would not be sinning. It's just, God has given us wisdom. Let's use it.
I think that's good. You wouldn't sin if you married any. That's really right. Yeah. I think without Christ, like, what mission is there to live for other than self, or like self-actualization, ambitions that you might have? But if you're both Christians, you are on the same, like, you're still working on the same kingdom together, even if you're very different. That's why I think you can always find your way back to each other, because you have the same center, which is Christ.
Yeah, and as long as most people are actively actually, trying to be like Christ, I think it can work. Like, it might be some ups and downs with any relationship. There are those challenges, but like, it can work. So yes, what I wanted to ask you about was, you brought up you wish maybe you didn't date that friend because of the friendship. I don't know where I really sat on the spectrum of that. Like, do you date a friend? Like, what if it works? What if it doesn't work? I'm always an optimist. Like, well, let's just see if it works.
Yeah, you told me to say you should do it.
And then I'm like, wait. Then if I get far enough, then I'm like, I should rethink this whole thing. But I'm starting to, based off, and I'm not in a relationship, but things have changed with a certain friendship of mine. And I'm like, you know what? I wish, like, I knew that I didn't want to do X, Y, and Z with you, because now I feel like, where is the friendship? And it's like just not even apparent. It's like a distant memory so much. So you're like, yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get back there. So it just
Aw.
seems lost. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, do you feel like, I don't know, granted, your perspective is yours. You guys don't have to take it, but could there have been a coming back like to the friendship, or is it really like,
Maybe. Yeah, maybe part of it's circumstantial that he moved back to the Midwest,
Okay.
where he was from, shortly after we broke up. So I don't know.
yeah,
I feel like if we ran into each other in an airport, we would hug each other. It would be warm.
yeah,
We'd be I think we're cheering each other on from afar, you know. But it was painful. I mean, breakups are painful, and I guess, yeah, it's still like God's in control. I do think your friend group. I do want to caution against like, oh, you might regret dating a friend. Like,
Mm.
you should date your friend. Like, you guys already. I do think some people ignore the people right in front of them. They have this like idealized person that they're waiting for, and there's someone right in front of you. So yeah, I think when in doubt, and you really want to try it, try it. Like,
yeah,
in life, in adult life, you have to make new friends every 5 years anyway, right? So like, it's gonna be okay.
yeah,
It might seem like this is my friend group, it's so precious, but like, give it 5 years, half of those people moved away or got married or like have a kid or
yeah.
yeah. So I think in the grand scheme of things, we probably would have lost touch anyway because he moved away. But yeah, so I do feel sad that like that's not
Yeah.
like a friend I have anymore. But there's a lot of friends I don't have anymore. No,
Of
for no
course.
particular reason.
Yeah.
Just drift, and that's okay. So yeah, don't ignore the people right in front of you. I would not.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be the
I'm
takeaway.
yeah, but like I'm like in my head like, dang, who do I need to be like?
Especially guys. I think they
You think
ignore
guys do it?
do it more.
Do think so.
Yeah.
So I do want to put it out there. I very much think they do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the irony of it all, because I personally, and maybe this is just my safety, like it's easier for me to say, I'd rather date a friend because I feel comfortable with you already. So for me, it's like a safety, like,
Mhm.
you know me. I think
it's maybe for men it's the opposite, where it's like, oh, it's a bigger risk because
you.
yeah, and
Mm.
you're not gonna be like all like, oh, you're so
Yeah, I'm not
amazing, right? Like,
I'm not gonna be gushing over you.
yeah,
Like you're.
and so there's a little bit of an ego boost maybe when there's a girl you're dating who like adores you right off.
Good insight.
I don't know.
No, I think well, granted, both of us are not men, but
Yeah.
if I had to bet, I would bet with what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
I'd be like, yep, that makes so much more sense. Because I do think that the last guy we had here, he was talking about respect.
Yeah.
And how respect is huge. And I was like, okay, we hear this all the time. Please define what you mean by respect, because the ladies could use some help. Because
Sure.
when I hear respect, it sounds like you want me to treat you like my dad, or treat you like the president, or treat you like, my boss. Like, what is it? But I forgot all the details of things he shared, but you can check the last episode. But some like, at least the feeling I got was that somebody who like thinks you're like special, like when you say something, she values what you say. And I'm like, yeah, some of us, it's not like we don't value it, but we're not telling you, oh yeah, that's
and maybe that's a good message for us ladies who, if you have good guy friends in your life that you wish would like have their eyes open towards you, and that I think God does that, like opens not the eyes of a man towards a woman, but
men.
Maybe remembering like if you're moving from friendship into a relationship, you have to be their cheerleader. I mean, in both directions, obviously,
of course.
but
she's talking to us.
Yeah, I think we, oh, you're my friend. I don't have to respect you. Like, no, like that's, if you're moving into that new role, you gotta,
show up.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we show up for the role as the
respect role?
Well, the
respect
role or whatever. I mean, you're a married woman, so you know like what your husband at least desires or expects or wants from his wife. Granted, we're not wives yet, but as wives to be like, what are some of those things you're like, if you can get good at this now, get good at it.
That's a good question.
The respect thing for one, I know many of us feel like, not all, but I'll speak for myself and whoever feels like me. It's like, okay, I'm going to respect you, but all this extra lovey-dovey stuff, I don't even do that on an average day. So now you'd ask me to do that. This is hard work.
Yeah. And I should feel a little like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
enough.
I think, here's a little bit of advice like that I heard at a bridal shower from an older lady in my church. in high school, and I still remember it. She said, don't ever talk badly about your spouse when she's telling the bride to be. She's like, don't go to work and complain about your spouse to your coworker, because then your coworker has like, even if you love him, you guys are fine, but maybe he annoyed you that morning, or he took so long in the shower I couldn't get, that's why I'm late, because of him.
Yeah.
That's their only impression they have of your husband now.
Yeah,
like just that one thing. They don't have the whole story, and they don't know your whole relationship. So just in a public perspective, and anytime you're speaking of your husband, like speak well. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you're always going to have friendships that know both of you, and and that's probably a good practice with all friends. I know that's something I need to work on. Like, not talking badly about others to others.
Because sometimes it feels like, oh, we're venting, and it's like, maybe don't vent at all to this person who doesn't know both of you.
Yes. Yeah. And you're forming an impression of your marriage or your friendships in that sense. Let's see. Another thing I think form strong friendships with other single men, like single men. Boundaries, obviously. You have to have boundaries, but I think like college was a great way to do that. Or being on, I was on a worship team in school that was we were very close, all of us, and shared a lot about our struggles, and learned a lot about the things that men tend to struggle with more than women. And, we were all praying for each other and in community. And, especially things like pornography and, learning what that really does to a man, and like how it's spiritual and emotional, and, usually connected to some hurt relationship in the past. And like, don't underestimate. That's not just a thing that you do to like feel good.
And you can't solve that problem either.
Right. I think, obviously the priority is like, if you want to marry someone, like they should be porn free.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's good to like kind of understand that, because it's so endemic right now.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate it, how it can really like cause a man to be like lack confidence in a lot of areas. Even if they're pursuing Christ and really trying to move forward, like it can still be really, really hard to do a lot of things when you feel that shame all the time. So male friendships,
because I don't think we talk about that, especially to women, to say, hey, you should be aware of his possible struggles. And then I think if we took it a step further, don't just be aware, but like meet him with grace. Because I think I'm hearing a lot more married women be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a thing. And I honestly don't even know how to respond. Like, I don't know.
I mean, statistically, like most men are like engaging in it to some degree, right? It's just so easy.
And social media has made it worse.
Or soft porn, right? Like things that are very like
movies.
Yes. It's like right in front of us all the time. So I think you can use like your single years to like grow in friendship with single men and like understand them better, so that you'll understand your future husband better. I mean, you asked about things that prepared me for marriage. I think living with roommates is a great way to prepare, because you kind of learn how to be an adult with another adult. And
do you think it's
by someone else?
Sorry, do you think it's different from living with like family members?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's like in marriage where you're with someone from another family background and has their own dishwashing habits, their own cleanliness standards, and the groceries they like to buy that you don't. So it's kind of simulated like experience of what marriage is. Marriage is more fun than living with roommates, but in that sense, but it's good preparation.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another thing. And this, I think, learning a lot about parenting as much as you can. This is also part of picking out the person you want to marry, is knowing what you think about parenting. Because there's so many philosophies out there, right? And it is not good if a husband and wife are not on the same page about how you want to go about discipline, or like how you want to handle certain types of situations, or how much media you want your kids exposed to, or like all those, what do you want to do about schooling?
Yeah.
Like I've met people who are sure right now that they want to homeschool, and they wouldn't marry someone unless that person also was open and wanted to. Yeah. I think that's like way more important than being on the same page on politics, or I think like parenting's way more
But
important.
politics is the last thing I think of
Yeah.
when I'm thinking of like dating someone. So I'm like, oh, when does that come up? Until November, right?
Yeah.
Whatever year.
Well, you'd probably want to be with someone who for whom politics is not a huge deal.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, because I'm like, please don't bother me with that. Unfortunately, I don't think I voted the last one. And my excuse was, I for some reason couldn't get my voting registration to move back to like home versus college. So I was like, I'm glad to not have a burden on my shoulders.
We live in a state that always goes one way, so it's kind of like,
that state does.
Yeah, I think so.
So I was also just like, oh gosh, the stress.
You're not a swing state, so it's okay.
Yeah, no. The stress I had, I was like, yeah, I don't think about politics. I care about local politics, like my community, my town, my state. But I care about the politics, but I just don't want somebody who's going to be bothering me.
Yeah, like really
especially if we don't agree. Maybe I'll be concerned. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of people I know who get married and have never talked about parenting until they're pregnant, and they're like with the spouse, and they're like, oh, wait,
are we going to...
we see this really like, take a class like when you're, about parenting before you get married. Make sure you agree or
advice before you get married
or talk. I think just the books about parenting are fine, but it's better to find like a family that has kids that are the way you want your kids to be.
Okay, so
that's what I would do
with the modeling template.
Yeah,
I was gonna say if you say take a class, like where can people find these classes?
My church had a class called like Thinking About Kids, and it was for young marrieds or people who are engaged. I think we took it when we were married, but and it was all about raising kids in the city and about like why we need community, and there were some things on like discipline and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of churches offer things like that, or listen to some podcasts or whatever. But ask a mom or dad who's like who you think of as like a really good mom and dad what they read or listen to.
Yeah.
Or just watch how they parent. Yeah.
I will say I've been blessed to be around a lot of parents.
That's great.
So I've been able to see different things. Of course, some things I'm like, oh, that's great. Maybe I don't want to do that. But yeah, I realized not everyone in my age group or in the season of life where they're unmarried actually has access to that. So
yeah, I mean, that's what's great about the church, right?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of ages, and it takes some effort, as a single person to kind of put yourself in the life of a family, because I will say like my lifestyle is so different than when I was single. Like I'm home every night mostly, and we've got to get our kids to bed at 7 or 8 o'clock, and then my evening is kind of quiet, and I get up early to put them in, to school, get them to school. Like it's a very different lifestyle. But there are a couple single people who have really made an effort to come to me. Mm-hmm. So there's this sweet friend named Grace who has like just sort of invited herself to dinner on Mondays. She brings her own dinner, which is like so sweet. I don't really have to cook for her. She's like, I just like being around your family. And she'll just sit at her table and we just hang out for that, couple hours. And then I'm like, okay, I got to go put them to bed. And she's like, okay, That's cool. But she kind of came to me. We are more homebound when you have kids, little kids. So that might be why it feels a little hard to see people outside church.
Yeah.
But if you go to them, and moms love it, like to have another adult around that
they're like, come over.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to work hard. You don't have to do the laundry. Just be around and talk.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, from the moms I see online, they're like, oh my gosh, having an adult conversation after a long day with kids is like golden. So
yeah,
I think like your friend does, like just showing up versus feel like I have to be invited in. Like, I mean, if you show up, they'll invite you in.
Yeah. She'll send me a little text like, hey, is it okay if I come on Monday?
Yeah.
Because she knows I'm here, I'm around. And there's, being in this house, we have all these guests that come through in groups and stuff. So we have a lot of single adults who like come through and hang out with us. But yeah, if I was still in an apartment somewhere,
it'd be different.
Yeah, I'd want to make sure like we have a couple people like that are like in and out of our home.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can summarize.
Yeah.
The first was we talked about being respectful. but being his cheerleader. Then this is how y'all know I'm without my brain cells. Then the other thing we talked about, and you can help me, please. But,
yeah, let's see. Having a story. We talked about that.
Yes.
Finding your mission.
Yes, your mission. Making sure you're aligned.
Making friends with men. And,
yes,
making all in your single group.
And then understanding like their struggles and showing up with grace for that. And then Penny chipped in really like quickly that, you know, it's best that your husband is porn free before getting married, which I've never heard before, but I like that.
Is that an unpopular opinion?
No, I don't even think it's something people are thinking of. I feel like we talk about porn in the context of marriage. Or for like, the woman, it's in the context of marriage. For the guy, it's like, this is a struggle that men face. But nobody has said, and women struggle with porn too.
Yeah, they do.
Talk about, but the rates are different.
Yeah.
But I think nobody has invited single women to think about like, hey, this can be something that affects your relationship. And maybe you want to, I think about it like having guardrails in place about, like being informed, like how you want to navigate that versus like being like a deer caught in the headlights.
Yeah.
I'm the mispreparer as much as I can kind of person. So hence my perspective. Unwanted by Jay Stringers.
Yeah.
Well,
I've heard about that a lot lately.
And it's really good. He's actually working on another book.
Cool.
He didn't ask me to do any promo. He doesn't know me. Yeah. But I mean, I boast in that book.
Someone told me about it today. That's really funny. Go read it, everyone. It's a sign.
It's a really good book. And I didn't think that it would be for me, but there were things that I didn't realize were coming up for me when I listened to him and his wife talk at Renaissance Church. So I was like, I'm going to read a book.
Good.
Book. Then Dr. Julie Slattery.
Oh, I don't know her.
Tommy told me about her after we learned about Jay Stringer. She has a podcast called, I forget, but you can look her up. The name of her ministry is Authentic Intimacy.
Okay.
And so they talk about sexuality, what God says about sexuality, what the world is saying about sexuality, and how God wants us to navigate our sexuality. And it's not just limited to conversations for husbands and wives, but singles, children, parents helping their children. So it's been nice to like listen in on the podcast to realize like, here's how people are navigating these things. How your single guy friends are navigating their walk with God, especially for Christians. And then the last,
some parents in your life.
Oh yes, parents.
We think about how you want to parent before you're getting married. Yeah.
Oh, good point. You know, we talked about parents at the beginning of like receiving their advice.
Yes.
And submitting to that. But now also, especially if they're God, they honor God with their lives as Christians. But then also, how do you want to parent?
Yeah, it's good to like think about, you know, what do I want to do differently than my parents? You know, in an honoring way, right? Not everybody does everything perfectly. I'm sure I'm traumatizing my children in some way. That's very sobering to think about. Like, what do my blind spots? And what do you want to do that's the same? There's really a lot of books out there for couples who are dating with like good questions to talk about. Andy and I did one of these books. It's out of print now, but it was by this guy named Bob Beal, Biehl. It was Bob with two B's at the end. It's kind of fun.
Okay.
Anyway, it was like getting to know your life mate to be. It was a little bit cheesy, but it has all these like it's a very thin little book, and I have a copy. I should just scan it, so it's not that many pages, but it has a lot of good questions like, what did your parents do that you'd want to keep doing, or what were the most meaningful experiences you had as a child that made you who you are today, or what did your parents do when you would go on vacation, or like what are your expectations for when you get away and do something fun? Like there's every marriage is a cross-cultural marriage. Andy and I are both white, but he's from Connecticut in the Northeast, and I'm from the Midwest. It's a big cultural difference, even though like a lot of similarities too. There's some bigger cultural differences in some couples, obviously, but every family is its own little, it's just a micro society, I think is the term.
100%. I mean, you can be from the same town, village, but just grow up because there's different people. So that book, that How to Date, what was it? How to Date?
Getting to Know Your Life Mate. It's out of print now. I know, I really should just scan it.
You might find it on thrift.
Yeah, maybe like I think it was like a self-published. Yeah, okay. I don't think it's probably out there. But there are other similar books, like conversation starters for like people who are getting married. Yeah.
I forget the name of the man who runs Desiring God.
Oh, John Piper.
Thank you. I think our singles ministry leaders told us about like 101 questions or questions that he wrote. So, there's somebody out there with questions.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, some of them are so practical, like financial stuff. Like, if you won the lottery, what would you do with that money? Like, or if you had the opportunity to buy a boat or a vacation house, or, what would you do? Would you do it, or would you save it and do something else with it? Like those big financial decisions that can happen, like those are big ones that could really hurt your relationship if you're not on the same page.
Yes. How do you speak to the person who's like, oh my gosh, this sounds so serious though?
Yeah,
I would just want to like walk in the park.
Yeah, we don't have to do it all the time. We would do it when we were dating sometimes. So we went on, I would like join his family on their like little lake trip to New Hampshire. And we would go for like one long drive and go through a few. So we didn't do it all the time, but only when we started getting more serious. And it does feel a little awkward. You're like, okay, like flipping through the pages. Let's talk about this. But we had so many good conversations. Like you really learn about cool things about each other. But yeah, I mean, getting married is serious. Should take it serious.
Serious business.
So, yeah, but it should also be fun.
Yeah, I agree. I'll see how I show up when I'm in that stage, 100%, because I'm like, let's see. In my head, I think I am that person who loves to just, everything for me is like safety. So it's like, are we on the same page? Is this going to work? Like, if it's not, like, we could just quickly decipher and discern, like, maybe we're not we can let this go. And so sometimes I feel like I have to come back to like, hey, be present in the moment. And I'm just like,
there's such thing as too much.
Yeah. And so I'm on that end. Whereas somebody else is just like, I don't want to even think. And I'm like, wait, no, you need to be thinking about these things.
I'm like doing the work. Yeah. But yeah, don't do it out of fear or trying to control the future. Right. That's
God help me. So I hope you guys learned a lot.
I'm sorry I didn't have more stories. I wish I'd.
Well, I'm sure this is how I see it. Once you come to the faith table, you'll be back for something.
Okay.
So, speaking of the faith table, this is our little circle. No matter where I go, I pray. I always have a circle, and I'm going to make sure that's my thing for our podcast. So you don't have to say it out loud, but it's like you can say a prayer or a thought in your mind. God hears and knows all things that you're believing God for. And I pray it happens for you. And so I'm really glad Penny was willing to come on the podcast because she's our first married.
Oh, first one?
Yeah, first married woman and married person in general who's coming. And I'm also just really blessed that I've gotten to know Penny over the last year because we met around September 2022.
We bonded on our names both and in LOPE.
Yes, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Penelope.
Yeah, I'm so glad you know how to say it too. And then, this is the part I didn't get to say at the beginning. I want to make sure that you guys know it. So let's open our Bibles to Isaiah 62:4.
Oh, yeah.
Because, so I was telling the ladies that I was on the prayer call with last night, I've always heard the name Hephzibah, but the only context in which I heard it was this rapper in the community in New Jersey. And so I thought it was I didn't know about this.
His name is Hephzibah?
Yeah.
Rapper?
I'll tell you. I mean, my face is probably saying it, or I'll tell you details after. I can't tell you guys, okay? But Penny can find out.
Oh, all right.
Nothing to do with me, by the way. But so that was his name, and so I was like, I know that's not his real name, but like that was his stage name. So I was just like, cool. I've never heard this name before. Then I think I saw it one more time, but in passing. So when I saw that we were being invited here for Christmas holiday gathering for the choirs, like, let me look up this name. Like, is it, what does Hephzibah mean? So then I found Isaiah 62:4. So it says, and this is in the Christian Standard Bible, it says, you will no longer be called deserted, and your land will not be called desolate. Instead, you will be called, my delight is in her, Hephzibah, and your land married, Beulah, for the Lord delights in you, and your land will be married. So that's actually our, like, key verse for our event this Saturday.
Oh, wow.
Since y'all will just be hearing this after the event, I can tell y'all it's the prophetic bridal shower. So it's an exclusive OPYW event. And I don't know if it dawned on me that this was going to be our verse. Like, I just knew we were going to use this space because you know how I planned something that and I just knew we were going to use this space. But then this was the verse that has been like on my heart.
And where our name comes from. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Hephzibah house. Yeah, Hephzibah is here. So I just want to acknowledge.
Yeah. I mean, it is like, it's marriage language. Like, Hephzibah means like to delight in, right? Like, just, and in a weighty sense, not just like, oh, I really love ice cream, but like, I just love this, you know, like this is important, and I'm going to delight in it. I'm just going to like, yeah. So we're a hospitality ministry, and, you know, marriage in ancient Israel there's a hospitality aspect, right? Jesus used marriage metaphors when he would say, I'm going to prepare a place for you. That's what a bridegroom would do. And he would go and build a little house on the side of his parents' house, a room for his bride, and he would come back. It was always a surprise when the bridegroom would come back. It was like a surprise wedding, you know. And so we don't know when Jesus is coming back to take us to the wedding of the Lamb, right? But when he's talking about hospitality in Isaiah, right? Like we're being welcomed into the family of God. Like, so that's what kind of our guiding star at Hephzibah House is, to like pass that on. Like, God delights in you. Like, when you're here, do you feel that? Do you sense that from our staff, from the space, like, or that it's like a place that God prepared for you? I think it's cool that it's like paired with marriage language, because marriage is the ultimate act of hospitality, because you take someone into your life, with every vulnerability they have, right? It's the ultimate act of hospitality.
That's amazing. And I always try my best to remind people who are new to our platform, who just feel like, oh my gosh, are you guys another platform obsessing about marriage? And I'm like, no, personally, I didn't want to be married. So this is very far from that. But we're ultimately called to be the bride of Christ.
Yeah.
So yes, that's what we're ultimately preparing for. Because if we all passed today and we weren't married, it wouldn't matter compared to seeing the ultimate bridegroom.
We are a bride. Yeah. No matter what. Yeah. So I love that perspective. I think that's really special about this.
And I do feel very welcomed here, because for over, I don't know, I wonder what my teammate would say if it's been a year and a half now. I've been like, God, I'd love to start the podcasting, but I'm not going to rush it. I don't know how to go about it. And when I landed on your website, you guys said you were offering the space. I was like, send me apply. I'm interested. And she was like, yes. And I'm like, no way. Cool. Really? And so I am just blessed and grateful for the opportunity we have to be here. So thank you. Do you mind closing us out in prayer?
Sure.
And you can pray for all the single people listening.
Yeah.
Your heart desire.
Sure. Father, we just thank you that we are your bride, that we get to prepare as brides, whether we get married in this life or not. We are still preparing to be the bride of Christ, to be everything that you have called us to be, to live in the story that you've given us. I know one of the hardest things about being single sometimes is wondering, am I desirable? Why doesn't anybody want to be with me yet? You know, but we are delighted in by you. And I pray for anyone out there that's having that struggle, that feeling undesirable, that your delight in them would become just so much more real in some way, this just right now, that it would be bigger than any insecurity they might have about whether someone of the opposite sex delights in them or not. Your delight in them is so much more and so much bigger. And it's something we still need after we're married too. So thank you for delighting in us. Thank you for welcoming us into your home. and for doing everything necessary for that to be possible through the cross and your resurrection. It's because of that huge sacrifice that we even get to be part of your story. And I thank you for Titi Lope and her vision for this, and pray for the retreat this weekend or the event this weekend, and that everyone coming would sense that you delight in them, that they are Hephzibah to you. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Penny.
Well, thanks.
And there you have it. While I wait, an Operation Plan Your Wedding podcast. We're grateful for Penny. Follow us on Instagram. Soon our website will be out. The podcast, well, you're one listening, so that's out by then. I don't know what else to do in my spiel, but thank you guys for listening. Have a wonderful day.